This video is a supplemental video to a message that I delivered on Sunday, September the 21st, 2025. It's regarding evangelism and how to communicate effectively. And we're going to, in this video, discuss five propositions, five claims and or questions that people make in opposition to the Christian faith. And when we're evangelizing, these are concepts that we want to be somewhat familiar with and somewhat capable of giving a response to. And so I shared them in brief on Sunday. I want to go over them a little more fuller in this video, and also to give you, for the sake of memory, this video so that you can refer back to it to have these capabilities. Now, there are many times that you will not encounter these objections. But they are fairly common to encounter when you do get someone that's giving objections. So one of them is, and some of these are multiple things wrapped up in one, but they're related to each other. So one of them is the church is just a money-making scheme that brainwashes people and is filled with flawed individuals that are just going to let you down. All right, so there's a handful of things to touch, but it's all related to how we feel about the church. Like people might say, I don't believe in, or I don't accept or embrace organized religion. It may be terminology that they would use. So I want to know how to respond to that, and I'm going to pick each component. So first, the church is a money-making scheme. What we want to do is we want to be honest with people and not deny things that are true. There are churches and there are Christian organizations, religious organizations, that really care more about their financing than they do other things. That is real. That does happen. We don't, hopefully, we don't support that, and we're not okay with that, but there are organizations, Christian organizations, that are that way. So we're not denying that. That is actually more a demonstration of flawed human nature than it is that we shouldn't work together. Now, also, in order to achieve the things that a church aims to achieve. So here's some examples. If our aim is to help reach more people and help people come to know Christ and grow in their maturity and to be supported, continually supported and resourced in the form of teaching and groups and those kind of things forward on their journey, that is going to take some resourcing. For example, often it is easier, more convenient, or even completely necessary to provide facilities with which these individuals can meet. And those facilities requires money to purchase and or build those facilities and to maintain those facilities, as well as the utility cost and some other technology cost. If you're going to do worship, you need instruments, and you need screens, and often you need internet, especially for streaming, and so there's a whole lot of cost to that, as well as if you're going to have individuals, because it takes time to provide those kind of services. If you're going to have individuals that are going to devote their working time to that, in addition to any volunteer time, when churches, and often they do, deem that that's necessary, they need to be able to provide a living for that individual or multiple individuals, and that also takes resources. And so churches are going to ask for money, but the reason often is for that, to take care of those needs so that they can continue to do the service that they are providing. And we don't want to be dishonest about that, but we also want to make sure that they're aware that that's what's happening. It's not that they're just trying to get paid, it's that they're trying to advance that cause, and it takes resourcing, just like any other nonprofit organization that provides a service. They're going to need to get some donations in order to provide that service. It's a money-making scheme that brainwashes people. Now, Yes, some religions, and we don't want to deny this, like the Marilyn Manson, Jim Jones, David Koresh, like some of those organizations, even Scientology, different groups that have done things that they were using emotional manipulation and intimidation to keep people controlled under a certain perspective. Yes, that's brainwashing, keeping them isolated from other sources. Yes, that's brainwashing. That's where you're trying to control what people believe. Now, that's different than trying to influence what people believe. So just simply teaching things, because if you start to include that we teach regular beliefs and worldviews in the form of sermons and classes and discussion groups, then yes, that is taking place within a church. But if you include that in what you call brainwashing, well, then you're going to have to include a lot of other things that people likely accept. Our public school systems, any schools, are teaching information, and that if you're going to say teaching is brainwashing, well, then the schools are doing that. Most of our media, including social media that has algorithms that just keeps giving us stuff of similar vantage point and interest, as well as the shows we watch, the movies we watch, the music we listen to, are all messaging. They're all presenting certain worldviews in means that are often more powerful than the church is able to provide. It's more vivid, it's more emotionally evoking, and it surrounds us more in our culture on a constant basis. Then you would have to say that our music and our social media is brainwashing. Our friends are brainwashing. Our company that we work for is brainwashing us, if you're going to incorporate that. So we want to help people see that if what you're saying is people trying to influence our viewpoint, our perspective on things is brainwashing, well, then you're going to have to cut out a lot of things more than just church. And I bet that people are not cutting out those other things. And so if that's the case, then it's not legitimate to cut church out for that reason. It's just not, because it's not thought control, and you can't judge all of the groups based on the few that have been ethically wrong. Now, the other part of that, it's filled with individuals that are just going to let you down. Again, we want to be honest that yes, the church includes people, and people are limited and flawed. Sometimes it's just because they're not capable. That's the limitation sign. And sometimes they're going to do things because they're fleshly and they get tempted to do the wrong thing. That happens everywhere you go. If our qualification to being a part of a group is that the individuals involved have to never do anything that would upset me, make me uncomfortable, or hurt me, I couldn't ever be a part of a group. And I think that people are actually moving in that direction of isolation, and I think people are feeling the negative effects of that. And so we have to help people see that it's not, you can't actually isolate yourself, or you can't cut out the church because there's people in there that are flawed. It's just the nature of it. And plus, if the mission is to reach more flawed people, bring them in and help them to move forward in their faith so they become less and less flawed, then we're going to have a constant influx of people that are flawed coming in. They're going to be around. They're going to cause problems. That's just human nature. And so we'd have to reject all groupings of ourselves if that is the case. Now, if a person is tempted to say, well, then yes, I'll cut out all groupings and I want to isolate myself, that's another angle that we're going to have to approach. We have to show people that by design, and you can see this really in studies now, the amount of people that are depressed because of isolation and loneliness shows us that we can't actually be healthy and be alone. We have to be in community, and the church provides the greatest access, the easiest access to that. And so all of these things I need to know to push back against that claim. The second claim is, how could a loving, all-powerful, all-knowing God create a world with so much suffering and send people to hell for all eternity? Again, that one is an even older claim or question that people have used to object to the Christian faith. And we want to pick that apart, okay? So people don't really have a problem with God unless he's all of those things. Because if he was loving and all-powerful, but he didn't realize when he created the world it was going to turn into a mess because he wasn't all-knowing, that would be an explanation. If he was loving and all-knowing, but wasn't all-powerful, then it would make sense that maybe he thought he could contain it, but he wasn't capable. That would make some sense. But the fact, if he wasn't loving, like he's all powerful, all knowing, but he doesn't care, that would make sense. But the fact that he's all loving, all knowing, and all powerful, that means that at some point the material world and humanity didn't exist, and God knew that if he created that, there would be all kinds of atrocities and horrible things that people would go through, and a lot of suffering. And yet he chose to make the world anyway, and he chose to create humanity anyway. Why is that? How can he be a loving God and do that? Some of that is a little bit on the mystery side. We don't necessarily know thoroughly why God chose to do that, other than considering things like Romans 8 that proposes that the suffering of this world is not worth comparing to the glory that is to come. That is, that there's something so good on the other end of our death, on the other end of this material world, that is so great that it was worth the sacrifice of all the atrocities. Now, we don't know exactly all the details of the other side of that, but we know that that's the claim. And so if that is the claim, and an example the Bible would use is that a mother who goes through painful labor is remorseful over the labor, but is willing, happy that sacrifice was made when they have their child in their arms. And so we know that this whole idea, we do sacrifice all the time. We push ourselves through pain, exercise, dieting in order to get a better outcome. And the creation of the world likely fits into that framework, that there's something so great that is worth the suffering. And couldn't God have just been in control and made it just not happen? Yes, but he wouldn't have been loving, because in order for there to be love, there has to be the ability to choose to love. Otherwise, it's not actually love; it's coercion. It's control, or it's the person's just a puppet. So they have to be able to decide whether or not they will love. That's the only way love can exist. And so God created us with that ability to make those choices. And many of us choose not to love, and it results in all the different problems that we suffer today. And it really has to do with, that's the sacrifice it takes to get to this glorious thing on the other end. And for the most part, it's us making the wrong choices that is causing this, and not God. Now, the part of sending people to hell, and a lot of people, even some Christians today, are trying to work out hell not existing anymore, or at least being temporary, because of how difficult it is for people to accept the idea that God would keep people in hell for all eternity suffering. One, it's what's revealed in Scripture. So if Scripture is true, it's just what's revealed in Scripture. And so some of it is a mystery. Even if I have some explanation, I still might not find it acceptable, and I have to decide if I'm going to accept those things or not. So, but there is some explanation to it. The way we see that the world is a mess now, part of this whole test is us demonstrating that we're the kind of people that you can take us and put us in a new heaven and new earth, and that place will be peaceful and loving and good. But if we're not those type of people, how can God create that new heaven and new earth scenario if he allows people that are not that in there? And so this hell is really like a eternal quarantining, setting up some kind of national boundary border to keep, setting up maybe even a prison system in order to keep those who are going to disrupt and disturb the peace out. And so when we think of it in that scenario, it makes more sense. Now, people will try to argue, well, there's good people that don't believe in Jesus, and why would they go to hell? Again, the demonstration is truly, you can't actually retain or remain good without having received Jesus Christ. We might be able to manifest that to some length of time, but we're not trustworthy if we're unwilling to yield to Jesus. And so that's the need for the quarantining. Another claim is the Bible is just a bunch of fables made up so that people can control us, and it's filled with errors. Now, the Bible's a bunch of fables, or maybe sometimes just an exaggeration of things that actually happen. That's based on an anti-supernatural view often, and most of the time people can't even give evidence. Because if someone were to say that and you were to say, so what's your historical evidence that these things are not true? And what they would say is, well, what's the evidence that they are? But what they're showing is they don't have a reason to claim that other than they just don't believe the evidence that was presented. And then we can lean into, there's a lot of evidence presented because we find all kinds of manuscripts recording things, and the biblical manuscripts are consistently demonstrated as historically accurate in the details that they share, which means that they should be trustworthy in the source that they are. And so there's the evidence points in favor that the documentation is trustworthy in the Bible, and there's very minimal evidence, if any, that will counter it. Most of the evidence that you would find, they might point to things like the Gospel of Barnabas and those kind of things. But if they were to do their research, they would find that all of those things tend to prove that they're historically unreliable. The Bible is pretty historically reliable. You can provide them sources. They can Google Wes Huff. They can Google Sean McDowell. They can Google Cold Case Christianity. Maybe I'll leave these links in the description below. They can look into a lot of the apologists that will provide all kinds of information that demonstrate that. Now, the claim that it's filled with error, I'm going to go, the two ends and then hit the middle part of that claim. The end claim is that it's filled with errors. Now, one thing to know is what they're usually pointing to is manuscript errors, copyist errors, and just know that historically there was no printing press until the 1500s, and so when you had copies of things, they were handwritten copies. Someone called a scribe would write the copy from one to the other. They would transcribe it, and that at times you would find variants, and the variance way some people count the variance is that if you have 1,000 manuscripts and they notice that one of those manuscripts spelled a word differently than all the other 999, that would count as 999 copyist errors, because it's that in error with these other 999. And so when people say there's hundreds of thousands of errors in the biblical manuscripts, a lot of times what they're saying, they're leaning on that kind of counting system, which could actually boil down to a handful. Besides that, the errors that are found are typically grammatical, or typically like punctuation or spelling, and not maybe the loss of the word those type of things, but they're not actually changing the viewpoint and the idea that's being expressed. And so, in fact, the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls really validated the accuracy of those manuscripts. And so there's really they don't really have a leg to stand on if you push back on them on the evidence, because there isn't really evidence to counter it. People are making these claims because they've heard them from other people, and they think they must be true, but they're not. Where's the evidence? The middle part of that is that these things in the Bible are made up so people can control others. That's like actually contradicts history, because the New Testament in particular was written in the 1st century, and the church had no political authority whatsoever. Not only did they not have political authority within the Roman government, but they had no political authority within the Jewish government, within the Sanhedrin Council and such. They had no authority whatsoever. And so to say that they were writing these things so that they can use it as leverage to control the masses, it wasn't until 300 years later or so that Constantine became an emperor and was a Christian and would make the Christian faith the national religion. But we're talking around 300 years prior to that the Christian documents of the New Testament was being written. So it's really completely historically inaccurate to make that claim. Now, the fourth claim is the church has done a lot of awful things that the Bible has directed, like slavery, and so God can't be trusted to be good. Now, there is truth to a lot of churches, and there are a lot of events in the Christian history in which the church leadership did horrible things. People will often point to the Crusades and to the Inquisitions as key points to point to in church history prior to or post-Bible. And really all there is to say to that is yes. You could look at the Catholic cover-up of molestation is another horrible one. And we should not deny that those things happened. Those things did happen. Those things happen in other organizations and in other nations and people groups and political organizations as well. So it's not, again, it's a human nature thing. Those are things that God did not prescribe. Now, the slavery part, yes, there is some somewhat prescriptions in the Bible regarding slavery. And what you need to push back on them is which commandments in the Bible are you referring to that command slavery? Because they might point to like the New Testament that says, the New Testament says for slaves to obey their masters. But you have to keep in mind that in that context, what's happening is the focus was the advancement of the Christian church, and disobedient slaves would create a disruption to that advancement. And so the salvation of others was placed as a higher priority than abolishing slavery. And maybe we still disagree with that, but that is the position they were having. It wasn't they were saying, yes, keep people slaves. They were trying to accommodate the mission that they were pursuing, and the eternal far outweighs the earthly. The Bible isn't a prescription on social justice. It is focus is the eternal salvation of our spirit, soul. Now, there are Old Testament things that have some prescriptions in various ways of slavery, and for the most part, they are in the regulatory passages like Leviticus, Exodus, and maybe even some Numbers in Deuteronomy. And the aim often was to move the people out of slavery or to limit it. And people have a hard time with this also because they think that, well, God should have just eliminated it immediately. But all these other issues that we've mentioned about how bad human nature is, what's the likelihood that people would have accepted that, especially if you go further back in time when it was much more accepted and approved of? And so it took a careful surgical procedure of pushing back on that to get to that place. And so we really, contextually, we can't look at that and say that this is a prescription for slavery throughout all human history. So again, that's the pushback on that. The last one is, what do you think about the LGBTQ community? This is, again, a more modern question. It'll happen often. You'll have people push back on that. And it's a tricky one to answer, because really what they're wanting you to do is either say that you don't approve of that community, and then that'll be their reason not to come into the church, or they're wanting you to approve of it. But the likelihood of them still coming to church, even with your approval of that community, is slim. But that's what they're looking for. And unfortunately, and they know it, they have us stuck in a scenario where Biblically, we cannot approve of the behavior and lifestyle of that community. But what we can do is help them navigate that, or at least push against the assumptions that are usually made, and that is that if you don't support the lifestyle of those in that community, then that means that you oppose them and you hate them and you hate people. And that's what you need to push up against, is I can disagree with someone's perspective, and I can disagree with a person's lifestyle choices without hating them. I don't have to hate them because of that. So if people if they make bad financial decisions, and I have that perception that they're making bad financial decisions, and I'm not willing to condone those financial decisions, that doesn't mean I hate them, and that doesn't mean I'm going to attack them or bully them or any of that stuff. And so we have to help people see that. And then we have to help them see that, well, what does the Bible teach on this? Is the Bible true? And it will push back to that question. Is the Bible true? And if it is true and is from God, then there are only two genders, and the only appropriate expression of sexuality is with a person of the opposite sex that you are married to. That's the only place in which that's not immoral. And we have to try to help people see that. And to see how it's not hateful to say that. And just show them kindness, that we're not yelling. We shouldn't be. We're not yelling. We're not calling them names. We're not running away from them. Maybe another aspect is they'll say that you're transphobic. You're homophobic and you're transphobic. Again, if I'm opposed to someone's financial decisions, does that mean that I'm debt phobic, finance phobic, bad, spending phobic? Like, is that what that means? I can't disagree with someone's behavior and without being afraid of the behavior. It's just, these are questions we should be asking them to try to challenge these different ways of thinking. So again, that's a lot of coverage for these 10 things, or 5 things, but I encourage you to be aware of them and know how to communicate them. As always, if you have any questions, you can leave that in the comments below. I'd be glad to answer them. But may God bless you and help you to endeavor doing his mission. God bless.